Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is the Upper Tier Podcast, the football podcast we bring you each and every week out there on YouTube. If you could head out there and smash that subscribe and bell notification button. Tonight we have a very special show. We have another order on, all the way from Dover in Kent, an avid Manchester United fan, but like myself, an avid football fan first and foremost. John McNicoll, welcome to the show.
Cheers, Niall. Thanks for having me on.
Brilliant. Great to have you on. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on as well.
Not a problem.
We will get into talk about the two books, which I think are excellent. But before we get into them, give us a bit of background. Footy, football, fandom, all that kind of stuff. If you're like myself, I'm a fan of football. I would watch kids on the street play it with jumpers on the street. I just love football first and foremost.
Yeah, I mean, sort of, especially this time of year, which would have been the World Cup originally. I was 9 years old, fell in love watching Italia '90, thought it was absolutely amazing. And it sort of went on from there, really. I'm a qualified football coach as well. Got my level 2 badge, started doing that a few years back. And it's like you say, I'm a Manchester United fan. But I would, I'd go and watch football anywhere. I've watched games all over Europe, all different teams. Like you say, if there's a game on, I'm quite happy to go and stand and watch it. Doesn't bother me.
Absolutely. I was a little bit earlier than you. I started following football in 78 as a 6 year old. And you wouldn't believe it. I think it was 82. My dad, God bless him, he's passed now, but he was a big greyhound owner. So he used to race dogs. And every year we used to go over to Wolverhampton and we used to race in Wolverhampton and Birmingham and stuff like that. And I used to stay on this farm with friends of the family. And I experienced World Cup 82 living on a farm in Wolverhampton and Birmingham for a month nearly, so you could see how people got caught up in it and all. It was unbelievable and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So they're my earliest memories of football and how intense it was and stuff like that and all. It was absolutely fantastic. In terms of I suppose before we get in, Manchester United, what's your feeling at the moment? Eric's gone in now. Happy with Eric going in?
I mean, look, we've had some of the sort of the better coaches in Europe. We had Van Gaal and Mourinho, and it didn't work out that great. So, I don't really know what the answer is at the moment. There's a lot of goings on at the club at the minute, a lot of unrest, and we've tried buying marquee players to keep people happy, and that hasn't worked either. So, I mean, look, it's always a new beginning when someone comes in. So you sort of hope that the players' new broom sweeps clean, so they say. And hopefully it'll be a bit of a sort of better season, because the last 6 months have been terrible to say the least.
Yeah, I find we cover the transfer window twice a week on the show with the latest updates and stuff like that. But I always find, like, even when your team is doing well, there's a certain anxiety about the transfer window, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
especially if you look at my own team, Liverpool at the moment, we're going to lose Mane, which is terrible. What a player, and the chances are, I think we may lose Salah as well. Because I don't know whether they're going to let him run down his contract and not pending him what moves and make. But there's just that anxiety when you're bringing new players in and established players are gone and stuff like that. It can just so easily fall flat in its face. But yeah, I thought I'd get your thoughts on that. Anyway, let's move on. The writing. How did the writing come about? When did this inspiration to write these football books come about?
like I say, massive football fan in general. Eat, breathe, sleep. It's just all I ever think about, to be fair. I started doing my coaching badges, got involved with a local team, sort of stepped away from that, really, work commitments and things like that. Just got in on Twitter. There was a fella who was sort of running a sort of like a website, and he was looking for writers, part-time writers, just voluntary work. So, submitted a couple of articles, got quite into that, and then sort of just kept bubbling along with that for sort of a couple of years, until about 2 years ago. And when we went into lockdown, the first lockdown, I thought, I'm going to have a bit of time on my hands here, like, because the country was going to come to a standstill.
Mm.
I mean, I'm a scaffolder by trade, so I work in construction. So we was under the impression that we're going to be sat at home, not a lot to do. So I decided to just sort of start writing a couple of articles, which in turn led to a couple of chapters. And I just thought, if I write a dozen chapters or a dozen articles and merge them into a story, then you've got a book. Surely that's the sort of basis of how to sort of go about doing it. So I did. So I sort of already had the sort of concept in my head about sort of, because me and my friend had sort of spoke about it in the pub, saying, jokingly, Pep Guardiola's broken modern day football by changing all these sort of, weird and wonderful formations. Everyone should just be made. We actually sent off to the official government petition to make all Premier League football teams go back to playing 4-4-2, but it never come to fruition in the Houses of Parliament,
Oh my
unfortunately.
God,
But it
imagine.
was sort of something, like two mates drunkenly down the pub talking about how good 90s football was when everyone played the same formation, give or take, and sort of how we've gone away from that. And that's how it started, really. And then I just sort of started researching teams that had played these formations. I mean, the obvious one is obviously, as a Man United fan, was us. So, and then it sort of, Arsene Wenger was the same until later on when he decided to go away from that. And it just went on from there, really. And like I say, it was just a case of just writing about each sort of team and whatnot, and then just trying to pick which ones out. I mean, look, Brazil, you would never have thought Brazil would have played 4-4-2. But when they won the World Cup in '94, they played a square 4-4-2 in the midfield, where they didn't really play with wingers. They had four central midfielders in a box that just
Yeah,
moved around the pitch.
yeah.
But yeah, so it was sort of stemmed from that, really. But there's a couple of authors that I chat to on Twitter, and they say once you start, it's very addictive. And I sort of got halfway through book 2 and thought, oh, that'll do me after this. And I've gone straight into book 3, and I'm already thinking about 4 and 5. Do you know what I mean?
Oh
So
my God. So the bug has caught fire, basically. Yeah,
yeah, I
absolutely. Yeah.
mean, it can be a bit tough, because obviously I work full time, and you've got a family and whatnot. So you do try and you've got to do an hour in the morning here and an hour after work here. So it does sort of, you've got to be quite disciplined. It does take a bit of your time, but obviously the end product is well worth the sort of sacrifice. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in the same boat because of the lockdowns and stuff like that. I got into podcasting because, again, I work in retail. I have a store, so that was shut down for the guts of a year or whatever it
Hmm.
was. So I was literally sitting at home here, and I just started podcasting basically out of this. And then I didn't realize the amount of work involved in it. And then when I went back to work, there was an expectation that I would continue the podcast, and so I tried to fit everything in, but it's flat to the board at times. Um, yeah, in terms of writing the book, do you plan it out in terms of, do you have an end game of what you expect the end product to be, or do you just sort of go along with it and eventually arrive at what you think it
Yeah,
should be?
I mean, I'd imagine it's sort of horses for courses with all different people. But on both of mine, started with like a sort of a start, a middle, and a finish. And both times I've got three-quarters of the way through and just juggled it all around and just gone on a bit of a tangent in another direction. So
Mm,
I suppose it depends what you want to try, and because mine's sort of history based as opposed to a story, you can't really rewrite history, so to speak. So what's happened has happened. So you've just got to
mm,
try and really work out, does that fit in with that, and go from there. I suppose if you're writing a novel, I guess you can sort of go in a certain direction. But yeah, it's sort of both times have changed. I've been quite flexible. I haven't been rigid and thinking it must be like this.
mm. Yeah, and in terms of your creativity, because I've spoken to other football book authors, in terms of your creativity, they've often said to me that they don't ever really arrive at being fully satisfied with the finished product. There's always look back and they go, well, there's something else I could have changed, or something else I could have put in, or something I
Yeah.
took out or put in, or whatever it was. Is that the case, or is it once you
Oh,
were finished with this one, especially out the 442?
yeah, absolutely. I think probably the sort of one of the best bits of advice I got given was a friend of mine's partner's a teacher, and she said when she was at university and she used to have to give in work, she said she would often, change the first she'd read it over and over and change the first few paragraphs, because that's the first bit you read. And I think when I did the first book, I think I changed the first chapter about half a dozen times, and in the end just thought, no, I've got to just do it, because you could, like you say, you could read it 10 times and end up with 10 different outcomes. Change this, or I'll change that. I think what I did on the second one was just wrote it, read it back through, see if it flowed, look for any obvious errors, and then unless there was something I desperately wanted to change, I've just left it, because
Okay.
otherwise you can become, like you say, you can become a bit obsessed with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, tell me about this. It's interesting to see the parallels between us. Um, when I told the family I was going to start podcasting, they kind of, you get the eyes up in the air kind of thing, and you go, "Oh, you think you're going to be the next Joe Rogan type of thing," and all this kind of thing, you know. So when you turned around, here's John McNicoll, construction worker and stuff like that, on lockdown, turns around, and goes, "You know something? I think I'm going to write a couple of books." What was the reaction from the family?
Yeah, I mean, it didn't really hit home until I'd sort of got the thumbs up from, because the company who published my book, Pitch Publishing. I
Yeah,
was in a bit of dialogue with them, and then they come back to me and said, I'd sent them an example off, and they said, yeah, we want to run with it, and it sort of kicked in then, and then all of a sudden there was a deadline, and it become, it was, but yeah, I mean, a lot of friends were just taking the mickey, like, yeah, whatever.
yeah.
And then obviously when you get to the end, you start public, saying, look, this is going to be out soon, and they're like, oh, you have actually wrote one then? I go, yeah, 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 I
Okay.
have, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and they still give me a lot of ribbing now, just
yeah.
oh, have you retired yet, Mr. Rowling, and all that sort of thing,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah,
but
I can
yeah,
imagine. Yeah, here's the Charles Dickens of football type of thing and all. You know.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's it,
absolutely.
and I get
Yeah,
the odd when you're down the pub and someone will say so, and they say, "Well, you wrote a book, you must know about it," but it's
yeah.
all good, it's all good fun.
So when the publisher gave you the time frame and they gave you the end game, what was the pressure like then? It must have become very real then, did it?
Well, to be fair, with the publisher, they're really good. If you submit an idea and say, "I've got this idea, I want to do a book about it," you send off a sort of a bit of an excerpt, and they say yes or no whether they want to go with it. But you give them the time frame, so they don't say to you, "Right, this has got to be done in 3 months." They just say, "When do you think you'll have it handed in by?" And then they go from there. So I started in the March 2020, and I think I said I would have it done within a year. And I actually got it done on the Christmas. It took me about 10 months.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so I handed it in at the end of, actually handed it in the end of the January, and it come out on the 5th of April. So it was quite, it was sort of about 10 months. And this second book's probably took about 10 months as well. So it's probably not a bad yardstick, really. And that's not really, busting your balls either.
Hmm. What was the feeling like when you held the first physical book?
Yeah, I'd got in from work and my wife said, something's been delivered for you. And it was the first printed copy. And it was a Friday night, funny enough. So yeah, we had a couple of lager shandies to celebrate. But yeah,
Celebrate.
even now I've got about 3 or 4 copies just dotted around in the room where
Yeah.
people have signed them and things. And
Oh, really
every
cool.
time I look at it, it just doesn't look real.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna bring up the book here, the cover, because I want to get in and show our viewers the cover, which I think is outstanding. What was the inspiration for the cover? I presume you were a Subbuteo fan like
Well,
myself.
do you know what? Right, I'm gonna my sort of one of my best pals. We sort of put the idea into my head. I was trying to think of a cover. I'm not. I might be sort of creative with words, but I'm not very good at graphic design or sort of anything. And I didn't really know what to do. But we used to always talk about playing the old video games, Championship Manager,
Yeah,
and obviously, and that's where the arrows, sort of from the wingers and the one midfielder going one way and one, because we used to say, that was the formation to play 4-4-2 with your wingers going up and your midfielders zigzagging in the middle. And then he said, well, why don't you do that with some Subbuteo players? And then, like, sort of each Subbuteo player depicts a team in the book. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I thought that's a great idea, and sent it off to the designer, and he sent it back, and it just, well, it looked better than what I thought it was in my head. So it turned out all right.
Yeah, it's an absolutely brilliant cover. Like if you're a real like football historian and you know your football, it just catches your eye so well. Like it's a brilliant cover the way it's done. Like as I said, regardless of the content in it, I'd buy it just for the cover because that's my love for football. It just reminds me of my childhood and stuff like that. And all really really good. Um, let's move on and talk about the new one then. Ode to the chosen few, football's piano players.
Mm.
Talk to me about that one then. What was the logical thinking moving? Obviously, you had 442 done. What was the move on to this one then?
I was watching a program, and it was high. It was actually highlights of the 2005 Champions League final when Liverpool beat AC Milan. And I was just flicking through. I was laid on the sofa, flicking through, and and I was just and off of Milan had just gone 3-0 up, and I just sort of caught myself just sat there watching it, and obviously watch the next 10 minutes unfold and all the goals and the penalty shootout, and I just thought, you know what, that day Steven Gerrard was insanely good, and the fact that he, as a captain and a leader, dragged that Liverpool team from the depths of despair to eternal glory. And I thought, I
As he
wonder
did
what,
so many times, as
yeah,
he did so many times.
and I
Yeah,
thought, I wonder how many sort of players in history have had such an impact on teams, in that sort of form. So I just literally got a notepad, wrote down half a dozen players, and it just sort of went on from there, really. So it was just a case of just doing a bit of research on the player, watching a couple of YouTube videos, and that was the next one, really, and that was it. So I just sort of tried to sort of pick a bit of a mixture of players from sort of old and new. I mean, chapter one's about Ferenc Puskás, because he was absolutely instrumental in both a Hungary team and a Real Madrid team. So, and
yeah,
then Diego Maradona, and then obviously you've got your Lionel Messi's and your Cristiano Ronaldo's, and like I say, Steven Gerrard. And when you actually read about all these players, that although they've been surrounded by good players in good teams, they've still risen above to score the last minute winners and the last minute equalisers and the winners in cup finals, and just take that team to the next level.
yeah. I wonder how big was the list, and did anyone not make the book?
Well, the thing is with writing about anything like this, I mean, if I go back to the first book, a bloke at work was an Ipswich Town fan, and he said to me, "How come you haven't put Ipswich Town in there? Because they reached the UEFA Cup final in 1982 or whatever it was." And but it's like anything; it's subjective, and sort of your opinion is not going to be the same as my opinion is not going to be the same as your opinion.
Yeah.
That's what we talk about down the pub. I think he's a good player, you don't, and
Mm.
vice versa. So I'd imagine there'll probably be quite a few people that say, "How come he's not made it in there then? Why did you, And but there, I think I've covered quite a broad sort of spectrum of players. But again,
Mm.
I didn't want to mention every player that's the best player that's ever played, because that's not what the book's about. The book's about players that have made an impact on a team, whether they've been there for one season or 5, 10, 15 years. Do you know what I mean? Like Gerrard did it for Liverpool over a decade, whereas someone, just for example, like Adel Taarabt, who played at QPR, like single-handedly got them out of the Championship,
Mm.
in 2011. Didn't really work for him in the Premier League, but that year he was their sort of instrumental player. So there's a bit of a mixture, Some of them, some have got chapters, and sort of at the end there's a couple of chapters of players that honourable mentions, so to speak.
Yeah, the secret for those people who say that to you is you can tell them, you wouldn't believe it. I have them in volume 2, and you can
Yeah,
gather all
that's
your
it. Yeah,
information for the next edition or the updated edition or whatever it is.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, hang
absolutely.
on.
When we're going to be dropping, by the way, the links are going to be down in the description there to Amazon and everything for all these the releases on the books and stuff like that. So any of our viewers at the moment who are looking to pick them up, out the 442 is out there already. You can pick it up. It's available practically everywhere, and we'll have links down there, and we have a link down there as well, out to the Chosen Few as well. In terms of out to the Chosen Few, which is your favourite chapter?
Probably. Oh, I liked the Johan Cruyff one was a good one. Obviously, Steven Gerrard and a lot of them play. Cristiano Ronaldo. I've lived through their career, so you see it day in day out. But when you read back to players from yesteryear, it's just really interesting because if you say to someone in a pub, Johan Cruyff, what's that mean to you? They'll say manager at Barcelona, did that turn that he's famous for, sort of the general things that you know about him. But when you start reading about things you don't know, like how he got into football, and all the bits and pieces that go along with it, it is really interesting. So you're learning as well, like sort of Maradona when he was sort of at Napoli and the things, that goes on there. So it's just things. It's like the research is nearly as good as the writing part.
Yeah, you'll see over my shoulder there if I get out of the way.
Yeah,
That's my Maradona jersey there, signed by him and everything and all. Yeah, absolutely. Classic piece.
nice.
In terms of, I suppose they say when you've written your first book, follow on books, it becomes a little bit easier. But what was the difference kind of in the dynamic, obviously, between 442 and the Chosen Few? I mean, it's kind of a slightly, was it a different approach, a different way of having to write? Or did
I
it just
think
flow somewhat the same way?
Yeah, I think, like I say, because I got three-quarters of the way through an ode to 442, and I was still sort of fumbling about with research and sort of bits and pieces, and sort of, I suppose, as I got towards the end, I got into a bit of a flow of looking for things and bookmarking things and making notes. So when I started the second one, I just carried on in the same vein and just use the same process all the way through. Do you know what I mean? And that seems to sort of work a bit quicker. So just makes things a bit easier, really.
Nice. And what's the plan? What's the plan for the launch on the new one?
There's, I think, I'll probably have a party at home. That'll be about it. But yeah, it's 15th of August is the launch day for the second one. So just as the football season's kicking off, which will be nice.
That's perfect timing. Actually, I'm going to bring up the cover here again as well. It's an absolutely fabulous cover. And look, when you look at a cover like this, could you pick three better players? Really, when you're picking from errors and stuff like that, and especially the two boys, Messi and Ronaldo. I mean, two boys that have gone head to head for years as the best players on the planet and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, I
And
mean, like I say, football's very subjective, and you'll speak to 10 different people who will tell you that 10 different people are the best player that's ever played. But with them three there, you're probably not going to be a million miles off. Throw your hat on any of them. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, absolutely. I was thinking when I looked at the cover as well and the context of the book, I was thinking about the time. Remember when Ronaldo came off and he literally coached the Portuguese team
Yeah,
to the win?
in the
Remember that?
2016 final.
That's
Yeah,
the first thing I thought of when I looked at the book, The Chosen Few, and I was thinking, and I mean, he's had some incredible moments in his career, but when he was hobbling around on the sideline, and I think he had an ice pack taped around his knee and all and stuff like that, and he was on the other side of the line, and he was coaching the players on and all that kind of stuff, and I just thought it was incredible, and I seen a video there the other day. I think it was on TikTok or something like that, and it was like, remember when he went over to tell your man to take the penalty? Take the
yeah,
penalty. It's no problem. You have this and all this. It doesn't matter if you miss. He says, just go do your best and all this. And it was,
yeah.
it
That's
was
it.
just,
Yeah,
yeah, it was amazing. So that one, when I seen the book, I thought of that straight away. How he just drove the team on, even when he was off the pitch. Like the manager really was irrelevant at that stage. He was
yeah.
literally coaching the team on his own.
He'd been outed
Yeah.
at this point, hadn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was absolutely brilliant. Well, listen, brilliant having you on. Thanks for taking the time.
No problem.
Really look forward to the new release. Really enjoyed 442. As I said to you off camera, because I'm a coach myself like yourself, it's a great reference book as well. And I've been
Yeah,
lending it out to some of the coaches in the club and stuff like that. It's been doing the rounds and they've been really enjoying it. Some good feedback. It's great because you can sort of scribble down some little points and tips. And especially if you're studying and doing your badges or your license and stuff like that, it's a great reference book as well.
yeah,
And especially when you're even talking, even if you're talking to the underage kids and stuff like that, and you're coaching them and stuff like that. And even then, I have a kind of a dynamic where I coach the younger ones, but I also coach up as far as under 19. And the
yeah.
dynamic between the two is crazy, like, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's,
I did the full spectrum from mini fives to adults. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I've
yeah,
been there. Yeah,
yeah. I often think the mini fives are more grown up than the adults.
yeah, they are. Yeah,
I'm
less
sure you've
less
experienced that too.
stressful. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, we'll get you back on again when Ode to the Chosen Few releases. As I said, the links are going to be down in the description for the books if anyone wants to pick them up. They are absolutely fantastic, well put together, well researched, some great information in there, and we wish you nothing but success with the release. It's going to
thank
be
you very
absolutely
much.
fantastic, and we'll look forward to number 3. Is there any hints about number 3? Can you drop any hints at this stage, or?
Oh, it's the number three is about. It's about basically my pain of following England. So, um, obviously, I was hoping that they. It's sort of secretly, I'd have been a bit gutted if they had won the European Championships because it would have ruined the tone of the book.
Oh,
But,
okay.
but
So this
you
is
know,
like John McNicoll's Diary of Adrian Mole following the England Football Club. Is it
yeah,
type of thing?
it's just obviously like I say, when I was 9 years old when Italian '90 kicked off, and then
Yeah,
sort of I can sort of remember leaving school in Euro 96 and sort of starting work and sort of just think going through from there really. But yeah, so I'd actually started the England one. I
mm,
started it after an ode to 442, and I did the first chapter. And I say it was just that afternoon when I watched the sort of highlights of the 2005 Cup final, and I started scribbling a few notes down, and just thought, you know what, I'm going to get stuck into this one. And sort of, so as soon as I finished, I'd already done the first chapter of the third one, so it was just straight. It was a good, easy transition.
yeah, I say that to guys all the time, even with the podcasting. I mean, you've referenced a couple of times being down the pub. I often say to people, down the pub is where you find the best podcasts because
Yeah,
it's where you find all the A-rated managers are at the bar, all the
yeah,
tacticians are at the bar. Everyone has an opinion and it's fantastic. But I also say as well, it's such a subject that's endless. I mean, you could write book after book after book about it, and it's the same with podcasting. When I started out doing this, it was like one show a week. Now we do shows daily, like, because it just grows and grows and grows, and there's just so much content to cover and stuff like that. So yeah, it's limitless really in what you can cover and what you can write about football.
oh, unbelievable. Well, again, so that's sort of loosely how the 442 book started. Was me and my friend, like I said earlier, sitting at the bar, sort of saying about how that was the best football and the best times in the '90s, etc. So yeah, that say drunken bar chat.
Yeah, absolutely. That England one sounds fascinating because it sounds like it's going to be your journey through football, through the national team and stuff like that. So that should be an interesting insight as well. Tell our viewers, where can they find you, look you up, or whereabouts do you? Where are you on
Sorry.
Twitter and all that kind of
Oh
stuff?
yeah,
Yeah,
my Twitter page is at the Wishy Man 80. What I'll do is I can send it to you if you want to put a link in.
yeah, we'll drop a link in
And
the description.
on Twitter as well, you've got at the Chosen Few book and at 44 book as well.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll put all those links in there as well for our viewers and stuff like that. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I love getting authors on because it's such an insight into the process and stuff like that. And we will have you on again when the book releases. We'll get an update on how things are going and what
Yeah,
the reaction has been to it and stuff like that. And we'll wait for volume 3 to come out, your own
yeah,
journey
that's it.
as an
Yeah,
England fan. That's going to be interesting as well. As always, folks, drop a subscribe and hit that bell notification button as well. And also, if you want to contact the show, it's the upper tier podcast at gmail.com. You'll find us. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, on Twitter at the _upper_ tier. And you'll also get audio versions of the show, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Amazon Music. John, an absolute pleasure, and thanks for taking the time.
no problem. No, take care.